Okay, well, we're approaching 6:05, unless I am told otherwise by important people, then I think we should get started. Let's see. We have 17 here out of 33 that have registered, so I'm thinking that the next couple will filter in if anybody else is going to join. So, good evening. Welcome to the Wellsville-Mendon Watershed Plan Environmental Assessment Telescoping Meeting. How are you guys doing? It is Tuesday. It's a lovely Tuesday evening. This meeting, the purpose of it, we are going to give you some information about a possible project going on in the Wellsville and Mendon area. And then we're going to do a presentation, and then you guys can ask questions. And we have a whole bunch of people here who are super knowledgeable and can answer your questions. So thank you again for coming. 1 second. Okay, so a couple rules, ground rules, really quick before we start. Please be kind. If you are not kind, you will be kicked out. I have complete faith in you guys. You're going to participate via chat on your right side of the screen if you would like to send in questions. You can send in questions at any time throughout the presentation, and then at the end, they'll be given to people to answer. Yeah, so that's how that's going to work. Let's go through the purpose of the meeting. Let's do it. So the purpose of the meeting, we're going to inform the community, y'all, about the study and NEPA process, which is this project, how it's going to work. And then we're going to invite and encourage public participation and feedback. We want to have project support, and we want to know your concerns and what your water resource needs are, because this project is for you. And it's really important to us that, and to the NEPA process, that we are meeting what your needs are. And so the best way to do that is to talk to y'all. So we'll get started. I think I'm going to, let's do introductions real quick. Monique, if you could, unless I'm forgetting something.
Eleanor, we just want to make sure that everyone knows that the meeting is being recorded, yes, as it's shown right there on the slide, and it will be available for viewing afterwards. So if you want to go back and watch it later, it will be available to you at this location.
Exactly, and it'll be on the project website, like Monique just said. So if you're having technical difficulties too, you can worry a little bit less, because it'll be there for you. So I think let's do introductions. So we have a project team. We have a project team for you guys. We have the NRCS, which is the government agency that's kind of in charge of all this. So we have Norm Evanstead, Derek Hamilton, Anthony Beals, and Jonathan Bingham. And then our project sponsor is Cache Water District. Hello. Hi. Thank you. Welcome. Our co-sponsors include Wellsville City Irrigation Company, Cache County, Mendon City, Wellsville City, and the Wellsville-Mendon Conservation District. And then the project team is Chad Brown and Mike Wilson and Monique Robbins and San Marie. And my name is Eleanor Chambers, and I'm just here to talk at you until the other people talk. I'm here to moderate the meeting. So whenever you send in questions via the chat, I'm going to see them. I'm going to keep track of them. And then at the end, I'm going to help direct those to our panel, and it's going to be great. So I think I'm going to turn the time over to, is Nathan still with us? Oh, just kidding. No, to Jonathan. Jonathan, if you would like to talk about the NRCS and NEPA process, that would be great.
Sure. As Eleanor said, I'm Jonathan Bingham. I'm the watershed engineer that'll be working with this project. And mostly they asked me to kind of present really why a Department of Agriculture agency is even in the room here. What's the purpose, why we're here. So a little bit of story time. Back in the 1950s, Congress passed Public Law 83-566, affectionately known throughout these slides as PL 566. And what this did was authorize the Secretary of Agriculture and funded him in efforts to support local communities with flood control issues and projects to control floods. And it authorized his agency, which at the time was the Soil Conservation Service, to head that up, which was, I think still is really the primary engineering agency with the Department of Agriculture. That's a long time ago. That law and that funding actually has done a lot of good here in the state of Utah. There's about 45 dams, flood control dams, retention basins that have been built using PL 566 funding through the years. In fact, in recent years, we've gone back and we've rehabilitated a lot of those structures to make sure that they still function and they're safe. Recently, Congress has gone back in and they have authorized funding for this program again for new projects. So infrastructure projects that are needed now. And that brings us up to the present day. The interesting thing about this program is it's a little bit different than what you might expect from a lot of federal agencies, where the agencies come down and say, we want you to do this. This program is community driven, basically, from the ground up. The communities see that they have a need. They come to I guess I should say, the Soil Conservation Service evolved into the Natural Resource Conservation Service, hence the NRCS in the room. They come to the NRCS and say, can we be funded under the Watershed program? And that's where things start. So really, this is a grassroots process. It's not coming from the top down. So that's one of the things I love about this. So really, it's broken down into three pieces. There's planning, there's design, and there's construction. And the NRCS, if projects are approved and move forward, the NRCS aids in the funding of all three of those: the planning, the design, and the construction, once approved. So if you want to move on to the next slide, I think we've hit that. So right now, as you know, we're in the very beginning of this process. We've approved funding for the studying and planning this. So nothing set in stone. We're just basically saying we have some needs in this community. And the way that we flush out those needs is to do a watershed plan. We look at what the needs are, look at some alternatives. We would go through what are the environmental impacts. So maybe you see the acronym up there. You've heard of NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act. Back in the 70s, that was passed. Basically, it said that the US government, that we needed to look at environmental impacts of our projects. We'll look at a lot of other things, the economic benefits of the project, make sure that there's more benefits than cost on a project. Look at a myriad of other things, social impacts, things like that. But that's basically what a watershed plan is doing, looking at all those things. And at the end, it's saying, here's what we propose as a solution to the problems we're having. And these are preferred alternatives. And then we would move to the next stage and ask for funding for design work. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where we're at and where we would be heading. The PL 566 funding, obviously it's a law, so there are rules along with it. And so the funding itself is allocated or earmarked for certain purposes. You can read the slide, but I think I'll go through it as well. Flood prevention is a big one. That was the original purpose of that law. It's been expanded a little bit. We do Agricultural water resource management is another. Watershed protection. It even goes out into municipal and industrial water supplies, water quality issues, public recreation. I'm not sure if that was in the original law, but that is something that can be done at the same time as some of these other things. Fish and wildlife, structures, rehabilitation, things of that sort. So infrastructure this program helps with. It cost shares with the entity, the sponsor that is requesting the help. So in a nutshell, that's why NRCS is involved. That's kind of the process and what a watershed plan is. And then I'll just turn the time over to Nate with the water district so he can describe a little bit more.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. For those who don't know me, my name is Nathan Dowgs. I'm the general manager of Cache Water District. We're the project sponsor, as Eleanor said earlier. And I'm just going to give a little background of how we got to where we are right now with this particular project. It started a few years ago when Wellsville Irrigation Company hired an engineering firm to work with them and look at the possibility of pressurizing their system and putting in secondary water throughout the city. As they moved throughout that process, I met with them as a district, and we talked with some of the other entities, the co-sponsors on there. Wellsville City and Mendon City both had some interest in looking at potentials of improving irrigation systems. And then we got the county involved, and all three of those entities have a number of flooding issues throughout the watershed. And so we looked at different funding sources to move a project forward, and PL 566 was the best fit because it focuses on flood control and ag water efficiency improvements. And so we submitted an application a little over a year ago, and were funded last fall and got a contract early this spring with NRCS to move this project forward. So we're just starting the process. We look forward to getting comments from as many of you as possible throughout the next couple of weeks before the public comment period ends, with any concerns or issues you have in your area that fit under any of those 8 items that Jonathan talked about earlier, because we can work on potentially a number of different things inside the watershed if they fit under one of those priorities that NRCS has set. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chad now, I think, to go throughout where we're going to go over the next year or two on this project.
Thank you, Nathan. As Nathan stated, my name is Chad Brown. I'm the project manager on this project with Franson Civil Engineers. And we just wanted to say thank you to the NRCS for sponsoring this project, working with all the co-sponsors that have been identified on the project, looking to address the needs of the community and to address the concerns that have been identified to this point. And as Nathan just mentioned, we're looking to address and identify additional concerns and of the community and the public as a whole. So as you see on the map located here, you can get an idea of where the project is located. I think many on the call are from the Cache County area, but this meeting is a public meeting, is for all public. And so we wanted to take just a couple of minutes to talk about where this project is located and some of the impacts. And so the project is located in northern Utah, just south of Logan, within Cache County. Mind going to the next slide, Monique? Thank you. In looking at the project, as we began to look at the possibilities and the potential for the project, we identified, as you see on the map, the watershed that would be studied. So anything within the yellow lines that you see there is our study area or the project area, the watershed that we will be looking at. And as Jonathan mentioned, there are 8 purposes that can be looked at as far as as projects and needs that are identified through this process. What we have looked at, or what has been discussed with the sponsors to this point, is specifically flood water protection, agricultural water management, and then looking at the possibility for recreation, potential recreation spots related to water. The project needs that have been identified through those conversations with the sponsors and co-sponsors are specific to reducing flooding. What can be done to prevent the flooding that comes off of the Wellsville-Mendon, the Wellsville Mountains? As you look at the map, the Wellsville Mountains are the green area on the right side or the west side of the watershed. And so there's runoff there, but there's also at times rain on snow events or just melting snow that comes into the communities across agricultural lands that create flood damage. And so we're looking at what are some measures and means that could be done to address that flooding to better protect structures, homes, properties, roads. There's a railroad that runs north and south through this watershed. What can be done to protect that infrastructure? We're also looking at what measures can be taken to improve the irrigation water delivery in the communities, specifically at this point in Wellsville and Mendon, but also, anywhere within the watershed. What could be done to better use the water resource that's available within that area? Can we look at lining canals, piping canals, improving existing systems to better deliver and more efficiently deliver that water to the end user? So those are measures that are being looked at and considered at this time as well. We're also looking at potential wildlife habitat improvement. What are some things that could be done to look at that? And then, like I said, recreational opportunities that we'll look at in just a minute on another slide. So the next slides really demonstrate historically some of the flooding damage that has occurred within this watershed. Specifically back in 2012 and 2017, there were some major events that flooded, created quite a bit of damage throughout this area, damaging culverts, roadways, as you can see in the bottom right, railroads, roads. And so this is really the need that was presented or has risen to the top through this, through the conversations that have happened to this point, is what could be done to address this flooding. And as Jonathan mentioned, that's really what this funding program originally started, and why the NRCS funded these types of projects was to address these flooding concerns. So on the next slide, the map shows some potential features or projects that have been identified. Nothing at this point is set in stone. These are just ideas of possible projects, ideas of what could be done to address some of the flooding. As mentioned on the slide, looking at replacing culverts, looking at improving natural channels, looking at diversion structures or potential debris basins or smaller catch basins that could help to take some of the high runoff and reduce the damage or the flooding. As you can see on the map, there's a few different symbols and colors that are identified there. The black dots represent possible culverts that could be improved on the north end of the watershed. There's also areas in Wellsville and throughout the watershed that we would look at or could potentially look at. The blue lines identify some of the natural channels that could be improved. To what extent, that's part of the next process, or part of what we've got to look at is what does that look like? What would be involved there? And then The red line and some of the other lines are identifying areas of where maybe we tie into or look at providing additional piping to existing irrigation systems to better convey and better deliver the water to the shareholders, whether they be farmers or residents within the communities of Wellsville and Mendon, so they can use that water for outdoor use. The green dot that you see there is an idea that has been presented to possibly look at some recreational enhancements at Wellsville Reservoir, looking at maybe creating a boat ramp for kayakers, paddle boards, canoes, those types of things. Probably not looking at motorized watercraft, but man-powered, like I said, canoes, kayaks, paddle boards, those types of features that could be enhancing that resource to the community and allowing people to better utilize the reservoir. That's an idea that has been brought forth and considered, and will need to go through the process. So these are all just ideas of possible projects that have to be looked at. As Jonathan said, we have to follow the NEPA process. We have to go through seeking the public's input about these projects, the concerns. Are there any environmental impacts that need to be looked at and considered? Next slide. I'll go ahead and turn the time over to Monique to talk about the next few slides.
All right, thank you, Chad. As you mentioned, my name is Monique Robbins, and I work for Franson Civil Engineers, and I am the NEPA lead on this project. And the federal funding is through NRCS, and that triggers the NEPA process, which is a pretty large-scale planning process to go through and determine what issues and resources need to be addressed with the project. And with the scoping process, we really are looking for ideas and issues and other things that fall within those purposes that are authorized under the NRCS's program that we can include in this program, in this project, so that we can be sure to encompass anything that would be a benefit to your community. And during that is a public participation. So there will be this meeting today, and then there will be another meeting down the road when we have a draft document. We'll be looking for additional input on that. So we're looking for support. If you're excited about the project, let us know. If you have suggestions, if you have questions or issues that you know about, please comment and let us know about those so that we can take all of those into consideration as we're going through the planning process. Some of the key factors that play a role in the analysis are engineering standards. NRCS has standards, the state has standards that we all need to follow as we're going through the process. And as Jonathan mentioned, there will be an economic analysis to make sure that the benefits are greater than the costs. And we have to coordinate with different government and agencies to make sure that we're following the NEPA process, and NRCS has their own processes as well. And then we look at the environmental impact resources, and the next slide shows a listing of a lot of the resources that we'll consider: water resources, water quality, visual and aesthetics, park and recreation, air quality. So all of these different resources that could be affected will be analyzed and taken a look at. So the NEPA process, just wanted to go through this again. Jonathan had mentioned it, but there are 3 phases to the NRCS process. And we are at the very beginning of the planning process, which is the first one. And this portion of the NRCS is funded at 100%. So there is no cost to the sponsors or co-sponsors to prepare this planning document. And it typically takes 18 to 24 months to go through this process because, as I mentioned, we'll go through all the different resources. There will be surveys that need to be done, and there will be partial design work done as well. And then the next phase is the design phase. That process is also funded by NRCS at 100%. And then when we get to the construction phase, which we expect to be in a couple of years, that has different cost share components. So the flood protection, which is high on the list of priorities and issues, is funded still at 100% by NRCS. And the water agricultural management is at 75%. So they would be looking for a 25% cost share for the beneficiaries of that portion of the project. And then recreation is at 50%. So again, 50% would need to be funded by the local entities. But those are all we currently have funding from NRCS for the planning phase. And then once this process is done, then we'll look at what funding is available at that time for design and then construction. So as I mentioned, some of the next steps, we're going to be collecting comments and taking a look at those and processing to see how we can incorporate those comments and answer your questions into the design and develop some alternatives. And then we'll be doing resource surveys, such as biological wetlands, if there's any wildlife, so different resources out on the ground to see what's going on out there. And then we'll be analyzing the alternatives, taking those alternatives that have been developed and refining those and determining which one is the proposed project that we want to move forward, and doing a partial design on that. And that helps us with the economic analysis to know what our cost versus benefit will be. And then we'll be looking at the environmental resources, and then we'll have a draft document. And at that point in time, will be another public comment and process meeting just like this one. And then the final result that will come out of this process is a FONSI, which is a finding of no significant impact. And that's what we would like to see so that we can move forward to the design process. So as has been mentioned, we have a public comment period, which started in April 27th, and it goes till May 27th. So if you have any comments, we would love to hear from you up until that date. They can be mailed, postmarked by the May 27th, or you can send an email to myself at mrobbins@francincivil.com. Or on the website, you can find a comment form and be able to provide comments using a comment form. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for you to submit comments. And this is what our website looks like. If you go to the website page, just there at the top right, you can see the Wellsville-Mendon Plan EA. If you click on that, then that will take you to, actually, you've probably already been there since you're here with us today. So, but that's where you can find that. So now we would like to open up to any questions that you might have. You'll use the chat feature, and it should look like this on your screen. And you can go down to the bottom and type in your question there and hit enter. And then Eleanor will help us to moderate those questions and read those. And then our panel of experts will be able to answer those questions for you. And we've got NRCS, we've got Nathan Dowgs from Cache Water District, who's the sponsor, and we have Chad Brown, who's our project engineer. So we'll just wait and see if you have any questions. We'd be happy to answer those.
Two already.
Okay.
You guys were overachievers. I love it. So the first one I think maybe would be best for you, Monique. It's from Badrero Tracy. They asked, what is environmental justice?
Well, that's a good question. Typically when we're looking at that, it's looking at like the demographics. So population, kind of anything that you would see on a census report, and looking at what impacts there might be to demographics in the project area. So, and if anyone else wants to chime in there, does Jonathan or Derek have a additional comment on that?
Cool. Okay, next question.
Nothing specific to that, Monique, but maybe if we do answer your questions, if you could just type into the chat, letting us know that that has answered your question, or if we need to follow up or provide any additional information, that would just help us make sure that we're addressing your questions.
Perfect. So let us know, Rogero, Tracy, if that answers your question, if you have follow-up. For the moment, we're going to go on. David Archibald asked, could that include expanding the size of the dam? He sent that when we were talking about needs, I think.
A clarifying question, is he talking about Wellsville Dam, Hiram Dam?
David, if you could put that in the chat. Once you do, we'll come back to your question. We have a question from J.R. Peterson. What are the rough costs going to be for the water shareholder?
I can take that, Eleanor. At this point, we don't have any estimates, any cost. That's really the scope of the project has not been defined. That's the intent of the process that we're going through right now, is to identify what are the public's concerns, what are the needs, and then we'll have to identify potential alternatives that would then address those needs, and then at that point put together cost estimates, and then, as mentioned, involve an economist to then evaluate whether or not the benefit cost ratio is, that the project is beneficial. And so I don't have a specific answer for you at this time, JR. That's really the process that we're going through at this point. As Monique mentioned, there will be additional public outreach and opportunities for the public to comment and participate through the process. And so as we get more information, as we move through that process, we'll be reaching out to the impacted communities with that information. So JR, if you could, let us know if that answers your questions, but unfortunately, that's really where we're at. I don't have any more information than that I could share with you at this time.
Perfect. David Archibald followed up, so we're going to go back to him. David Archibald said, could that include expanding the size of the dam? And then he clarified the Wellsville Dam.
So the Wellsville Dam and Reservoir is within the project area, within the watershed, and that is a possibility or a project or a feature that could be looked at and considered if there is a need that is identified for additional storage, or if it's flood controlled. Those are things that could be looked at and considered through this process.
Perfect. We have a question from our in-person meeting at City Hall. Are you going to focus on Wellsville and Mendon cities before you focus on agriculture?
I can take that. I don't know that there's any priority being set over or another, project or benefit, one need over another. The entire all of the project purposes will be evaluated and considered and looked at. So I don't know that we would say one purpose is greater than the other, and that one community would be ranked or considered above another. All of the concerns or needs will be evaluated and looked at equally.
I can add on to what Chad said. Just to reiterate, we are really in the beginning of this process. Nothing's solidified. The reason that Mendon City and Wellsville City's issues came to the forefront here is because they're the ones that brought it forward, said we had some issues in this watershed. But really anything that is within that watershed boundary is possibly eligible. So if we do have agricultural needs or things, that's why we're having these meetings and bringing it forward. That's why we want you to comment and say, this is an issue we've had for years. Is there anything we can do? And then we compile all of that, and that goes into this planning process. So, and as Chad said, there's not anything weighed higher than another. We look at everything and try to come up with a preferred alternative. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you, Chad. Next question, Tim and Monica Gowans. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. If the proposal is passed, will participation in secondary water be mandatory? I live in a development in the southeast corner of Wellsville and irrigate using city water. I want to keep it that way.
No, I'm not trying to avoid the questions or not provide you specific answers, but again, we don't know at this point. In the end, that would be a decision made, in my opinion, this will be a decision that's made by Wellsville City and Wellsville City Irrigation, whether or not the project be made aware of those issues and concerns. And so we will make sure that we address that, and you'll have the opportunity to talk with the city to look at that.
Great. Next question from Tim Cronin. You mentioned wildlife. I'm happy to hear. This wouldn't include enclosing the canals, would it? We have a duck habitat over in the Wellsville/Mount Sterling area.
So I guess the question, let's see, enclosing the canal, that at this point, I don't know. I think that if the Wellsville-Mendon Water Conservation District wants to look at that as a measure to conserve water, to better improve their delivery, that's certainly an alternative that could be looked at and may be looked at. I don't know that it's specifically on the table at this point, but it could be. And so to specifically answer that question, again, we're not sure. That's the intent of this process, is to look at all that. Some of the wildlife management or improved wildlife habitat is looked at. One area that's being looked at is within the 3 Mile Canyon, which is kind of the north end of this watershed, north of Mendon, looking at some possibilities or potential there. But as far as specifically to your question, I don't know if it will. It may or may not be enclosed. That's something that could be looked at.
Tim Cronin, I recommend submitting a comment with that information. That way everybody has it. The team is all aware of it. We have it on record, and we can consider it as the project moves forward. Next question, Tyler Richards. In regards to pressurized irrigation, how are water shares going to be transferred to user fees? Some residents in Wellsville don't have water shares associated with their property.
So in early discussions or conversations with Wellsville City and Wellsville City Irrigation specifically, the city of Wellsville owns quite a few, and I believe the majority of the shares within the Wellsville City Irrigation company. And so I believe that the city is looking to put those shares to beneficial use. I don't know that they're currently being used, and so that's something that could be looked at through this process, is putting those shares into a secondary system, making them available to shareholders that currently, or making it available to residents who don't have shares within the company. That's one option, I guess, possibility. Those individuals who currently have shares, I don't know for sure if they would be required to come into the system, if they have the option not to. I guess it would raise the question of how would you continue to receive your shares if they did go to a pressurized system. I think those are all things that would have to be fleshed out and worked through this process. moving forward. If the shareholders are opposed to the project, then I think that those their opinion or those voices would be heard through this process, and then the city and the irrigation company would then have to make that decision to move forward. As a shareholder, you would have a say and a vote in that process.
Great. Another question from J.R. Peterson. Don't you have some historic cost numbers on comparable projects so you can compare against?
I mean, I guess you could say, looking at other systems, it could be anywhere from $5 to $25. I mean, it's so early in the process, we have no idea of what the scope of this project is going to be. The other thing, every project has different funding, has different features, costs. So to say historically, this is what a project should cost, they're all different. They're constantly changing, evolving. Again, I guess to maybe provide some assurance, that's why the NRCS has this process. They have an economist that looks at this to verify that the benefit exceed the costs and that it's a viable project. It won't move forward. It won't be funded if it's not a viable project. If the benefits don't exceed the cost, I don't know. I guess I'm not sure that I can give you any more specifics because the systems vary so greatly, and the benefits that each system provides is, again, different. It varies. And I don't know if Jonathan, if you have any thoughts to add there, but that, I mean, I don't know what else to say at this point.
My thoughts are very similar. I mean, I've been dealing with irrigation systems most of my career, and I haven't dealt with one that's the same yet. Different diversions, different piping systems. Some don't have pipes. It's just hard to compare apples and oranges. It's a really good question, JR. I really like that you're thinking that far ahead. I guess what I would say is stay tuned. Keep attending these meetings, keep watching your email, keep watching for information, and communicate with us, email or other methods, because that's really the stage we're in right now, is fact finding, and we're looking for that information. And at the end of it, we should have more data so we can answer those kind of questions, or at least we'll have indications of where we're going to be going. So please don't be frustrated that we're sidestepping a lot of these questions. The reason is we're here to gather the information so we can answer the questions at the end of this rather than having them right now. So thank you.
I just want to make one little comment too. This funding source through NRCS is amazing. There's other programs out there, but none of them have the cost shared that this one does. So as I mentioned, any flood control component or flood prevention is covered at 100% throughout the entire process. Anything that is attributed to the agricultural water management benefits is funded at 75%. And there are loans through the state, which you can get at 0 to 1% for irrigation companies. And so it really is a fantastic benefit to you as the community to be able to have this funding source available to you versus just doing the project and having to pay for it at 100%. So that will help with the cost that is passed down to each of the users.
Perfect. Next question from Tyler Richards. Does the NRCS have any requirements that pressurized irrigation needs to be metered for each user? And then a follow-up, hopefully shareholders will be on board with the projects. Pressurized secondary irrigation is the best.
I saw that one pop up. That one's probably geared more towards me. As far as I know, there are no requirements from the NRCS that pressurized irrigation be metered. That having been said, the state has put forth requirements for the future that systems be metered. So it would not be the NRCS pushing that, but legislation from the state level. And I'm not quite sure how or when that would happen. That would be something that we'd have to discuss in the process. But simply answering the question, no, NRCS does not do that.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Jonathan. Yeah, at the state level, there's legislation that continues to be brought forth, and there is some legislation in place that would require secondary systems be metered. So there's a good chance that this system would have to meet that requirement, that there would be meters on every user.
Great. And then David Archibald asked, is this what they're doing in the Newton-Trenton area now? Which might be a question for Nathan.
So I'm guessing what David is referring to is, well, Nate, why don't you do that?
Yeah, no, Newton and Trenton, the canal company out there, West Cache Irrigation, is doing a different project. They're pressurizing a portion of their irrigation system, but it's not through this funding source. They've went after
Bureau of Reclamation.
Yeah, they've done a couple of different funding sources to pay for that. So they're doing it their own private system, essentially, just inside one canal company.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. I think we are all caught up on questions. Anybody else would like to ask them, we encourage you to do so. We love getting all of this input. David Archibald said thanks. Yeah, I think we're caught up on questions. What time is it? Man, you guys are good. 6:52. Oh, we love it. I just get really uncomfortable when there's like 40 minutes of silence. It leads to me rambling, just like I'm doing right now. So if you have any other questions, please send them to the chat. We'd love to answer them. Like Monique said, you can go to there are a bunch of different ways to submit comments. We want comments to be written so that we can formally keep track of them for this project. Oh, thank you, Monique. There's a way that you can do that. This is the slide with the information on how you can do that. There's a bunch of different ways. Your comments can be questions. They can be, I think this, I think that. We welcome all input at this point because we are trying to work out how this project is going to move forward. The website, the study website down there at the bottom is going to be kept up to date as this project moves forward. So you can check that out at any time. I say we'll wait another couple minutes for questions or comments.
Hey, Eleanor, just going back to the comment.
Yeah.
Let's see, was Peterson? He was just asking how to submit a comment. Kurt, could you just let us know that you see how to do that? If we need to go over that again, we can address that. But if you wouldn't mind just saying in the chat that you got that information.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was just saying he knows of an issue regarding flooding.
Yeah, I had actually replied to Kurt saying, good question. We're going to tell you in just a second.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we had addressed that. So
Right. Okay, we have another question from Tyler Richards. Hiram City pressurized irrigation system is supplemented by clean effluent from their wastewater treatment plant. Has using Wellsville City wastewater to supplement been considered?
We have not looked at that to this point, but that's certainly an option that could be considered and looked at through the process. You would have to make sure we're meeting all environmental requirements, and then looking at the cost of bringing that water back into the system. So there are certainly maybe some challenges to that, but it's something that could be looked at through this process.
Wellsville is in a little bit different boat since Hiram is doing an active treatment at their facility and Wellsville is using a lagoon system. So like Chad said, there may need to be more treatment before you're able to use it that way, but we could look at it and see what that would require.
Yeah, there would be some additional cost to treat the water to bring it into the system, I'm pretty sure. So it'd have to be looked at.
Tyler, I also recommend submitting that as a comment so that we have it on record. Hopefully that answered your question. John Hardman asked, will the Franson website have updates as things move along so the public can get current info? Yes, they will. That's my job. And so I will keep that website updated with all of this current info. We want you to remain involved. We're going to be sending out, correct me if I'm wrong, we'll be sending out more information like you received the public scoping notice when it comes time for the next round. Monique.
Yes. When the draft EA is ready, we will send out notification in the newspaper as well as mail notification to the residents. So yes.
Perfect. So short answer, yes. Yes, it will. Cool. I think we've answered all the questions. We are approaching 7 o'clock. Tyler Richard said, okay, thanks. You're welcome, Tyler. We'll wait a couple more minutes. Any last second questions, comments? We'd love to hear them. I love participation. It just makes me happy. Hopefully this process of coming to this meeting has worked smoothly for you. You can let us know in the chat if things didn't work smoothly or if you liked how this went. We're, it just takes adjusting, moving to the technology world. It was really cool that this time we could have both an in-person version at the City Hall and have the technology version available for everyone. So I like that a lot, personally. Cool. Okay, I think we'll call it. I appreciate everybody coming to this meeting. Thank you so much for your comments. Thank you for your participation. It honestly makes this process go smoother because this project is going to be so individualized to your specific situation. And so we want to do a good job of it. Do we have any parting thoughts from the panel or project team?
I just appreciate everyone coming. The comments help us a lot and coming up with solutions. And really, like we said, it is a community-driven process and project. It's for you guys, and we want to make sure that this works for you when we're gone. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Jonathan. Anyone else?
No, I'd echo what Jonathan said. We appreciate it.
Perfect. Well, then I think we'll call it. Just so you guys, as a reminder, this meeting has been recorded. It's going to be put on that Franson Civil site, the project website, within 24 hours for sure. Probably sooner. But you can check back there. You can watch this at any time. You can tell other people to watch this at any time. You can show it to your dog anytime. It's here for you. And we, again, encourage you to submit written comments during this comment period. So thank you all for coming.